When my family rejected me, I turned the pain into strength, and today I live the life I always dreamed of. My name is Ava. I'm 18 years old, and I still feel a mixture of anger and relief every time I remember the day that changed my life. I always knew my parents clearly favored my sister Amelia, but I never imagined they'd use my own birthday party money to pay for hers. I woke up that morning with a strange feeling, butterflies in my stomach, unaware that it would be the turning point of my entire life. I only wanted to celebrate my 18th birthday with people who truly loved me, but when I found out what had happened, the feeling of abandonment hit me so hard that I felt my chest ache, as if each heartbeat reminded me that I wasn't their priority. It was a mixture of despair, anger, and a sadness that seemed to overwhelm me. I felt invisible, disposable, and yet a part of me refused to bow to that injustice. I spent hours crying alone in my room, trying to understand how someone who supposedly loved me could do this. I felt ashamed of feeling hurt because my sister seemed so happy and my parents so proud, as if everything was normal. The feeling of injustice was suffocating, and my mind spun in circles, replaying every moment I felt left out, every gesture that showed favoritism. At the same time, a voice inside me told me I couldn't just accept this, that if I didn't react, my entire life would be like this, controlled, ignored, manipulated. And it was at that point that something shifted. The anger I felt began to mix with a quiet determination. I wanted to show myself that I could exist outside their control, that my happiness didn't need to depend on the approval or attention they never gave me. So I started planning. Deep down, I knew I couldn't count on my parents, but I could count on myself and those who truly cared about me. My paternal grandparents, Antonio and Eugenia. They had always been my safe haven, even when my relationship with them seemed hopeless. I remembered all the times they welcomed me, the sincere conversations, the affection that was never conditioned by favoritism. I grabbed a pen and paper and began writing down ideas, lists, simple budgets. I had no money to spare, no support, but I had the will. And that will began to give me strength, even though my heart was still heavy. I was afraid, of course. Afraid of failing, of embarrassing myself, of no one showing up. But that fear was now accompanied by something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope that I could create something of my own, without depending on them. As I jotted down every detail of my party, I realized my sense of control was beginning to return. Every decision I made, every call I made, reminded me that my life didn't need to be defined by those who ignored me. The anger was still there, but now it served as fuel. I remembered every previous birthday, every time I'd been left out, and felt a strange clarity. I deserved to exist for myself before anyone else. This realization made me cry again, but this time it wasn't just pain. It was relief, too. Relief at finally realizing I could choose, that I could act, that I could put myself first without guilt. That entire day was a roller coaster. Crying, anger, planning, fear, hope, all mixed together. But deep down, I knew that this was the moment that would decide how I would see myself from then on. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their attention. I needed myself. And it was in that exact moment, as I wrote down every detail, every decision, that I felt the first spark of freedom. The feeling that I could be the master of my own life. It wasn't complete. There was still pain, but there was also strength. And it was this strength that accompanied me in the next steps, reminding me that even amid abandonment and betrayal, I could build something that was my own. After deciding what my party would be like, I began to realize something I'd never felt before, a sense of autonomy that gave me some peace amidst the chaos. I still felt angry at my parents, but now that anger didn't paralyze me, it propelled me. Calling vendors, asking my grandparents for help, choosing every detail without anyone pressuring me was liberating. With each call and each decision made, I felt stronger, more capable of creating something that was my own, without relying on the validation of those who had never valued me. The fear was still there, of course. Fear of failure, fear that everything would go wrong, fear that my parents would mock my initiative. But I also felt something new, a quiet confidence, almost a whisper inside me telling me that I could do this, that I deserved to do this. As I spoke with my grandparents, feeling their sincere support, I realized how different extended family could be from my immediate family. Antonio and Eugenia went above and beyond to help me without judgment or pressure. They listened to me, hugged me, and encouraged me to trust myself. Every conversation with them was a reaffirmation that true love and care exist, even if they don't come from parents. I felt welcomed in a way I had never felt before, and this began to change my perspective on what family truly means. The pain didn't disappear, but it began to transform into strength. I was creating a circle of genuine support, building a network that didn't rely on favoritism or secrets. Preparing for the party also taught me something unexpected, that I could transform pain into action. Every decision I made, from choosing the music to the smallest details of the decorations, was a way of shouting to myself that I existed, that I had value. I cried alone, yes, but I also smiled when I thought about how everything would turn out my way, my true way. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, and that feeling slowly began to replace the weight of disappointment. The anger was still there, but now it had a purpose, to remind me that I could no longer allow anyone to diminish me. When I started inviting friends and cousins, I felt something even stronger. Their reaction was one of excitement and affection. I saw in their eyes that what I was creating had value, and this gave me enormous emotional reinforcement. I realized that my happiness didn't need to depend on money or my parents' attention, that there were people who truly cared about me and were willing to celebrate my life without conditions. I felt proud of myself, something I had never felt before. Because for the first time, I was acting for myself and not trying to please or impress those who had never valued me. At the end of that day, after finalizing all the details and realizing the party would happen my way, I felt something I'd never felt before. Real freedom, even if only a small one. It wasn't a complete release from the past, but it was a beginning. I could finally breathe without the weight of injustice crushing my chest constantly. And most importantly, I began to understand that what I was seeking wasn't just recognition, but dignity, respect, and true love, things I was finally building on my own. The feeling of strength and hope was so intense that I knew, even if the pain didn't completely disappear, I had found a path to happiness on my own. As the party took shape, I realized something inside me was shifting too. It wasn't just the feeling of control over the celebration, but a profound shift in how I saw myself. For years, I'd lived trying to please my parents, seeking approval where none existed. Now, for the first time, I felt like my happiness didn't depend on them. The anger still came in waves, especially when I remembered the money from my party that had been diverted to Amelia's, but it began to transform into clarity. I needed to create my own life, my own story, without expecting recognition or love from those who couldn't give it. Every decision I made strengthened me, and with it came a sense of quiet pride that no one could take away from me. One of the hardest moments was when I finally faced reality. My parents wouldn't change. As much as I wanted to believe they could value me, that they could recognize my efforts and my love for them, it was impossible. Sitting down and accepting this hurt more than anything else that day, but it was also liberating. I understood that I no longer needed their validation to feel whole. It was at that moment that I began to see my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins as my true support network. They were there, ready to welcome me, without judgment, without favoritism, just genuine love. And this showed me that family isn't just blood. It's care, attention, and respect. As I organized the final details of the party, I realized how small choices gave me a sense of power I'd never felt before. Choosing the music, the food, the venue, even the guest list was my way of proving to myself that I could exist without relying on anyone to diminish me. The feeling of freedom was overwhelming, and I felt hot tears stream down my face, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time, I was putting myself first, without guilt, without fear of being unfair. It was as if each simple act was rebuilding my self-esteem, layer by layer, until finally, I began to see who I truly was, someone capable, resilient, and worthy of love. When I started receiving messages of support from friends and family who would be invited, I felt a wave of emotion that overwhelmed me. I had never felt so much genuine affection from so many people at once. They showed me that I no longer needed to look for love where it never existed. What I was experiencing was a rebirth, the realization that my life doesn't need to revolve around those who ignore me, but that I can create my own happiness, surrounded by those who truly care. Each message, each word of encouragement, reminded me that my parents' abandonment doesn't define my worth, and that day, in the midst of planning the party, I began to feel the pain of the past begin to dissolve. replaced by the strength to prioritize myself. At the end of the day, physically and emotionally exhausted, I sat alone in my room, looking at everything I had managed to organize. It was then that I realized that this moment wasn't just about a party, it was about me. About learning that I can rise even when those who should support me abandon me. About discovering that strength doesn't come from external approval, but from believing in yourself. I still felt pain, still anger and sadness, but I also felt hope. Hope that I could build a life where my happiness and dignity were a priority. And it was in that moment, alone, tired, but with my heart pounding, that I understood that I was finally beginning to free myself from everything that imprisoned me. The day of the party arrived, and I was nervous as ever. But at the same time, there was a sense of empowerment I couldn't ignore. Everything was happening my way, with people who truly cared about me. When my grandparents arrived early to help me organize the final details, I felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. They were proud, smiling, hugging me, telling me I deserved it. Each hug reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my life didn't need to depend on those who never valued me. Their presence gave me the strength to face everything else, to feel that I could truly be happy, even if my parents didn't, recognize my worth. As the guests arrived, I noticed the contrast between my party and the life my parents tried to impose on me. The joy of my cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends made me feel truly loved, valued, and included. Every smile, every laugh, every hug was a reminder that I was creating my own space in the world, where my happiness didn't have to depend on those who abandoned me. I cried, I laughed, I felt whole. For the first time, the feeling of being invisible to my parents had no power over me. I was being celebrated by people who truly mattered, and that gave me indescribable strength. At one point, as I looked around, I realized how genuine my support network was. My aunts, uncles, and cousins, who were always there sincerely, were my real family. They helped me plan the party, encouraged my every move, and were there simply for the joy of seeing me happy. This taught me a lesson that would take years to fully absorb. Love and care are not guaranteed by blood ties, but built and cultivated. For the first time, I understood that my happiness doesn't depend on the approval of those who neglected me, but rather on my courage to seek and accept genuine love. At the height of the party, as everyone danced and chatted, I felt a clarity that made me stop and take a deep breath. All the pain, all the injustice I'd felt over the past few years wasn't disappearing, but it no longer controlled me. I had made a radical decision to put myself first, to love myself enough, to create my own celebration, my own life. The feeling of freedom was overwhelming, yet sweet at the same time. I realized that this day wasn't just about a birthday. It was about the beginning of my liberation. I was finally living my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who truly valued me. When the party ended and I sat with my grandparents to say thank you, I felt a profound relief. The anger, pain, and despair were still there, but now they coexisted with hope and strength. I knew that journey wasn't yet complete, that there would be confrontations and disagreements with my parents in the future, but for the first time, I felt in control of my destiny. The clarity that I could exist outside of their approval brought me peace. I had taken the first real step toward freeing myself from a toxic environment, surrounding myself with true love, and finally seeing myself as someone worthy of happiness. The feeling of victory was slow but tangible, and I knew that from then on, nothing could completely paralyze me. After the party, I felt a strange mix of tiredness and euphoria. My body was exhausted, but my heart felt light, as if I could finally breathe without the weight of injustice crushing my chest. For the first time, I felt like I could exist on my own, and that my happiness didn't depend on my parents' attention or favoritism. I still felt pain and anger, of course, but they no longer paralyzed me. Now they served as reminders of what I had already overcome, and what I could still overcome. I realized that strength isn't the absence of pain, but the ability to keep going despite every wound. In the days that followed, my grandparents continued to be my safe haven. Antonio and Eugenia helped me deal with my grief, accept that my parents wouldn't change, and that I needed to build my own life. From them, and from my uncles and cousins, I learned that true love doesn't come only from blood ties, but from care, respect, and attention. Each gesture from them reinforced the certainty that I wasn't alone, that I could rely on people who truly mattered. This learning changed my perspective on family, and taught me the importance of surrounding my life with those who make me feel good. One of the most memorable moments was when I was finally able to face my parents without fear, without crying, without begging for attention. I was calm, clear, and firm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to justify myself. I had built my own happiness, and that was enough. They realized they could no longer control my world, and I realized I didn't need their approval to feel whole. This awareness brought a sense of freedom I never imagined possible. For the first time, I knew my life was in my hands, and that I could choose who had space in it. Today, I still feel traces of that pain, but it no longer defines me. I learned that it's possible to rise up even when those who should protect us abandon us, that it's possible to build networks of love and support outside the home, and that happiness isn't something someone gives us, but something we earn for ourselves. The party, the organization, the support from my extended family, all of this was more than just celebrating my 18th birthday. It was the first real step toward freeing myself from years of neglect and favoritism. I found my voice, my strength, and my place in the world. Looking back now gives me mixed emotions, but above all, it makes me proud. Proud of myself, of my courage, of having transformed pain into action, despair into planning, and abandonment into true love. I know there will still be challenges, there will still be difficult days, but I know I can face them because I finally learned who I am and what I'm capable of. The victory isn't complete, it isn't perfect, but it's mine, one with tears, strength, and clarity. And that for me is enough to make me believe I can truly live, by myself and for myself.